Thank you very much, Giles, and thank you to the organizing committee and to Stephen DeMora, who invited me to address you all. Investment and dependence on the ocean economy is nearly as old as humankind itself. So why are we talking as if there is something new? Why are we using the phrase the blue economy? Why do we think there's a growth opportunity from the blue economy? And what do we even mean when we talk about a blue economy? I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of the ocean economy, define the sustainable blue economy, sustainable new blue economy, and suggest why we need to bring it to life, including the value proposition for ocean science and technology to support blue economic opportunities, and then list a little bit of what we need to do to make it real. The ocean economy has always existed for transport and trade, resource extraction, and sadly, for waste disposal, both intentional and unintentional. Even before there were human settlements, the ocean transported resources, animals, plants, seeds, powered by wind, current, and tide. Humans took to the sea very early on, and the ocean economy got its start with the harvest of nearshore animals and plants for subsistence, and then as the first fishermen were to leave the shore by boat or raft to catch or trade. Before airplanes, railroads, highways, before refrigerators, GPS, or the combustion engine, there was a maritime economy at a global scale. The first evidence that we've seen of maritime trade dates back to 4,000 years ago in the Indian Ocean. The global maritime Silk Road trade was well established by 2,000 years ago. The Roman Empire was defended by naval battles and sustained by maritime trade, as has every empire since. The fortunes of the British, Dutch, Portuguese, Spanish, and many others rested on an ocean economy. International trade was common at the regional level for millennia and grew steadily as advances in shipbuilding and navigation enabled seafaring across greater and greater distances. Early on, governments recognized the value potential of landed goods, and thus, as import duties were imposed, so too began the maritime industry of smuggling. Government investment in exploratory voyages expanded the sources of raw materials and created new customers, and even if Columbus and Cabot never made it to China, the Spanish and the British certainly benefited from the investments in their explorations. By the early 16th century, the French were fishing for cod on the coast of Newfoundland in the summers, drying their catch and bringing it back to France in the fall. Spain had colonized much of the Caribbean and parts of North and South America. In its early stages, what would become the Portuguese Empire was already building far-flung networks of colonies providing raw materials, goods, and markets from Indonesia to Brazil. Governments had carried most of the financial risk as transoceanic trade expanded by investing in shares of merchant ship cargoes, but eventually investing in merchant share cargoes became an attractive private gamble. In fact, Lloyd's of London was established in 1636 to do just that. By the 17th century, international trade was global and conducted by high-speed, sustainably powered Spanish galleons and Dutch fluits and other merchant ships from every coastal European nation, all built of natural materials, by the way. It was the beginning of an era, a time when trade was global, the ocean economy thriving, but still at a scale that was relatively sustainable from a consumption standpoint, even if there were certainly aspects of imperialism that were socially rather unsustainable and irresponsible. Empires depended upon the appropriation of natural resources from colonized and subjugated countries, the production and transport of crops, the transport and ultimately sale of labor to acquire these resources, and the accompanying trade in consumer goods. Maritime activities, military, mercantile, fishing, including whaling, were the means by which empires enforced and enriched themselves. The fortunes of investors, speculators, and nascent insurance industry were built from the participation in the international ocean trade in tobacco, alcohol, textiles, Chinaware, spices, oil well, and precious metal, and in enslaved peoples. In turn, trade permitted the exchange of ideas and information and sparked innovations in all fields of science and technology. It also spread some invasive species and various diseases. Even the Industrial Revolution was powered by oil from the ocean, for without spermaceti oil to lubricate machines, the scale of production might never have changed quite so rapidly. With the Industrial Revolution, we saw the beginnings of the over-exploitation of the ocean, the steady increase in extraction and other activities, enabled by the advent of steam engines, ships powered by coal and oil, and ultimately a fossil fuel-dependent global economy with a global expectation that the ocean was limitless in its capacity to provide for and sustain us, as well as to absorb the byproducts of our economy's waste in nearly every form. Thus, as a result of only the last 250 years, the pace and rate of change we are observing is unprecedented and will affect all of the ocean economy. New climate and weather variability will continue to affect transportation of all kinds, at least through the next century, disrupting the relative stable pattern that commerce currently depends upon. The ocean has absorbed more than 90% of the excess heat in the Earth's system, most of which is from our carbon emissions from our cars, planes, and factories. Since the Industrial Revolution, the ocean has become 30% more acidic and continues to acidify at an unprecedented rate. Just under 30% of the human population lives within 100 kilometers of the coastline, and this is already beginning to feel sea level rise and storm surges, and we know these are going to get much worse. Warming water is changing the migratory fish distribution and viability of aquaculture, which threatens the economies of fishing communities. Similarly, because of nutrient loading in warmer waters, low oxygen areas in the ocean are increasing in intensity, duration, and volume, depleting fish and affecting food webs. Sadly, many of today's explorations are focused on these threats, from plastic pollution to the loss of polar ice. The ocean is simply not what it was 60 years ago, and certainly not what it was 250 years ago. The historic calculation of what the ocean does for us, the traditional ocean economy, never measured what the ocean actually does for us. And neither have we carried it on our revenue and expense balance sheets for companies or governments. After a millennia of such exploitation, perhaps, it is time we did, and I'm happy to hear what OECD is thinking about. So what is it that the ocean does for us? The ocean generates economic values that can be very hard to quantify. After all, what is the dollar value of every other breath that you breathe? How do we calculate the value of climate and temperature regulation, oxygen generation, and carbon emission absorption? How do we calculate the value of the ocean's pollution filtration and waste processing? How do we calculate the ocean's cultural values, its aesthetics, recreation, fun, and inspiration? Of these, we only quantify direct economic activity with little consideration of the unseen cost of these activities, and we ignore the benefits of many of the rest. However, it may be that quantifying all of these benefits is not completely necessary as long as we acknowledge them. We need to agree that the ocean-generated values are threatened by accumulating human activities, and the scientific studies released just this fall confirm that the harm already done is much worse than we thought, whether this means that carbon emissions or overfishing, noise pollution, deoxygenation, plastic pollution, just to name a few. But we can summarize what's wrong in just 2 sentences. We take too much good stuff out of the ocean, and we put too much bad stuff in. And we simply must stop. We must restore the ocean's abundance and repair the harm done where we can. We can begin by ensuring that economic and related losses resulting from unsustainable use and abuse of the coastal and marine resources are captured in our economic risk assessments. We must focus on the subset of the entire ocean economy that is actually sustainable. The good news is that there are commitments to do better. 193 countries committed in 2016 to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that take into consideration how future generations will be affected by today's resource management and set goals for a new blue economy. Sustainable Development Goal 14 establishes the need to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. And by many reports, that one supports 10 of the other 16 SDGs, including the ones to end poverty and hunger. To fulfill SDG 14, we need to grow the subset of the entire ocean economy that is sustainable. Such an effort moves us away from destructive, extraction-focused business sectors that deplete our ocean resources, disrupt its functions, and thus damage our economy and cost people's jobs. This is what Dr. Jane Lubchenco calls Ocean 1.0, that the ocean is too big to fail. We're now on to Ocean 3.0, where the ocean is too big to ignore. We need to live as though climate change is real and that we can do something about it. The new blue economy is about taking control and not about giving up sustainability. We know many of the examples of the old ocean economy, and Merritt had some of them on the screen before: ocean and gas, commercial fishing, shipping, etc. And some parts of the old ocean economy are evolving towards sustainability, or could with the right investment. As an example, technology advances enabled better monitoring and understanding of the economics of high seas fishing, which takes place on 2/3 of our ocean that lie outside of national jurisdiction. A 2018 study showed that such fishing is wildly unprofitable without significant government subsidies, many of which are frankly illegal. Given the environmental harm and dubious human rights records of high seas fishing, ending all government fleet subsidies would limit fishing effort to that which is actually profitable. From the perspective of carbon footprint by weight and distance, shipping is actually the best way to move goods. But the industry needs to embrace and adopt clean fuel, clean air, and noise reduction technologies. Perhaps this is where the illegal fishing subsidies could be more lawfully reinvested. We also know that there are many new industrial sectors reflecting the changes in the ocean economy and the opportunities. And again, Merritt had a great list on the screen, including renewable ocean energy, seabed mining, blue tech, and blue biotechnology. These emerging sectors, some are still extractive and may not be part of the new blue economy, but some are focused on change, such as brand new developments in ship propulsion, and all of them need to be analyzed for their sustainability. Each of these can tap existing science and technology and take advantage of applied knowledge to support positive activities and limit negative consequences. In this pursuit, my friend Alexandra Cousteau suggests that abundance needs to be our collective goal. And that means ridge to reef, land to sea connections and activities. It means minimizing the harm from human activity to allow ocean ecosystems to heal themselves. It means governance that has to anticipate potential change in what is abundant and create the most hospitable waters for abundance, which means healthy mangroves, seagrass meadows, and marshes, as well as waterways that are clean and trash-free. We must restore abundance in biomass and work to grow to keep it up with population growth, and to have such restored abundance support the economy. This is not a choice about conservation, protections versus the economy. Conservation is good and it works. Protection, enforcement, and preservation work, and they all support economic activity. But we cannot just defend where we currently are in the face of demands that are going to increase, and in the face of conditions that are changing rapidly. We cannot even call it conservation if we continue to allow nutrients and other pollutants to flow unchecked into the sea, if we let the global ocean get ever noisier, and if we don't enforce the laws that we already have on the books. Our goal has to be abundance for food security and healthy systems. We have to get ahead of population growth and its corresponding demands on our resources. So our priority has to be changed from just holding the line to restoring abundance. And we believe this can and should engage all interested parties who want to work for a healthy and profitable future. The sustainable use of the ocean can enhance the ability of the ocean to provide its global services and continue to provide food and economic opportunities in fishing, restoration, tourism, and recreation, together with all of the activities of trade and transport. Developing the new blue economy requires a wide range of partners, including on-the-ground NGOs, scientists researching sustainability and ecosystem services, lawyers defining its terms, experts seeking new technologies for monitoring and solutions, financial and philanthropic institutions helping to bring economic models and financing to bear, and by working with local economic, natural, and environmental resource ministries, agencies, and departments. These many partners are identifying the leading sectors where smart investment can ensure that natural infrastructure and resilience are secure to guarantee clean air and water, climate and community resilience, healthy food and access to nature, as well as progress to restoring the abundance that our children and grandchildren will need. The coasts and ocean are a valuable but delicate part of our natural capital, and the take it all now, forget about the future, business as usual model of the current economy is threatening not only our marine ecosystems and coastal communities, but the functions of our planet on which our life depends. The ocean is not too big to fix. We cannot afford to let it fail. As I have said, we have a very good idea of what is wrong and what is harmed, and we have a pretty good idea of what to do about it. The issue here is not saving the planet. It will be here even if the ocean is hot, breathless, and acidic. But such a place will not be our blue planet. And our blue planet is what the new blue economy is about. So how do we get there? How do we get to this new blue economy? We need to incorporate the value of ocean and coastal ecosystems and services into our calculus of security, economy, and global health. We need to recognize that all nations' blue economies are connected. We need to recognize that restoration, protection, and enforcement are economic activities that underpin other parts of our economies and our security. We need to ensure that every ocean-going country improves their standing in the Global Illicit Trade Environment Index, the measure of how well countries prevent and enable illicit trade, because this illicit activity is a major obstacle to a new blue economy. We must develop policy agendas that simultaneously enhance ocean health and economic growth, and in a manner that is consistent with the principles of social equity, inclusion, and justice, agendas that work toward improvement of human well-being and social equity, while also mitigating environmental risks and ecological scarcities. We need to address obstacles such as inertia, old ocean economy thinking, and the insistence of having every single answer before we act. We need to overcome the lack of political will to do the right thing, whether it comes from government or industry. We must reverse some intentional misunderstandings of the blue economy. Growth for the sake of growth is not sustainability. There will be no blue economy if we keep taking too much good stuff out and dumping too much bad stuff in. How do we get back to abundance. First, we understand that restoring abundance means not subsidizing bad behaviors. We need to become infinitely more precautionary in setting baselines from which to measure progress. Second, we know that there's an internal rate of return for finance if biomass actually recovers. We need to ensure that the economic measures to value a project are based on such whole systems thinking. However, as with pharmaceuticals and other deep R&D industries, the costs are upfront and the returns are certainly not very immediate. So we need to figure out how to invest in and lower risk regarding our ecosystem services. We must pursue direct and indirect investment. This means protecting reefs and restoring mangroves and dealing with upstream sewage and pollution management so that the progress downstream is not upended upstream. Sovereign governments must invest in early stages of R&D to get technology to investment grade, which is how we got GPS, the internet, touch screens, and even the microchip. We need to incentivize innovation that meets growing needs such as monitoring and tracking sector, clean waste to energy processes to reduce at-risk landfills, increase the value of beaches, and increase small island energy independence. We can look at seawater air conditioning through heat exchangers, ocean thermal energy conversion, as well as other renewable energies. The right policy atmosphere makes these investments attractive, and that's what we ultimately need to create. My organization, the Ocean Foundation, is dedicated to identifying and investing in these activities that comprise the new blue economy. We envision a day when we can measure activities by whether they are good for the ocean, and we understand that good for the ocean means good for all of us. Our organization and the Center for Blue Economy are working to facilitate a multinational agreement on the identification of the new blue economy via mutually agreed criteria, including industrial classification codes. We're part of the advisory network for the high-level panel on the sustainable ocean economy. But we have not ignored the markets. During 7 years, we reviewed thousands of companies looking for products and services that are actively good for the market, figuring that it might, good for the ocean, figuring that it might be good for the bottom line as well. Then we went looking for a visionary investment partner, which we found in Rockefeller Capital Management, a company that already had a track record for investment, quality, and screening companies using corporate social responsibility and environment, social, and governance criteria. In 2012, we launched the Rockefeller Ocean Strategy, an international all-cap fund with active, long-only publicly traded securities. To keep the fund's investments actively good for the Ocean Foundation screens each company and provides Rockefeller with specialized insight and research on coastal and ocean trends, risks, and opportunities. Our investment hypothesis for the strategy has been confirmed by its incredibly strong performance, meaning what is good for the ocean is good for all of us. We are now moving to increase the funds under management to $1 billion, and this unprecedented ocean-centric investment fund, by the way, is housed in the family office of a rather famous oil baron whose family is now fully divested of oil and gas holdings. So change is possible. The institutions that help us do good better, monitoring, enforcing, and restoring, are integral to the future abundance of our ocean. So I'm calling on all of us to invest in research and development, accelerators, incubators, in companies that have a product or service that is actively good for the ocean, which is that subset of the entire ocean economy that is sustainable, that is increasing health, that is increasing abundance, because it will make profits, help investors earn income, and contribute to the ultimate bottom line, a healthier ocean. And that is how we get the new blue economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I think we have time for one quick question, or we can pick up your discussion in the panel session later. Is there one question here, please?
Thank you so much for your talk. My name is Denise from the University of Oxford and Nexon Foundation. I actually have two questions that link to each other, so I hope that's okay. My first question is around these non-market values of the ocean that you addressed during your talk. What is your vision on sort of more explicitly acknowledging these in economic frameworks? How can we actually do that? And then my second question is, how do you see the roles and responsibilities differ between developed and developing nations in establishing the economy?
Both are excellent questions. Part of my point is, even if we don't quite figure out how to value the ecosystem services, we need to know that they exist and that they're threatened. And if they're threatened, we need to take that into account. I think there are a whole bunch of economic theories, contingent valuation theory, et cetera, that people are applying to try and measure what these things are worth. We did one project on how clean beaches are from marine debris and backed it into the actual dollars that airlines earn flying to the Caribbean. It was an experiment, it seemed to work, and I think there's going to be some new steps along those lines. Your second question, remind me again.
Maybe we can pick that up in the panel discussion.
Yes.